Welcome to another episode of the Cannabis Review. We've got a great guest on the show to you today. We're going to help educate you on a couple of different things like the endocannabinoid system and patient access. I'd like to welcome to the show Mary Biles. Mary, how are you keeping?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me. Great to be here. Hi, everyone.
Pleasure to have you on the show. Now, I know you're going to be able to provide a lot of education for the couple of topics we're covering on today's show.
Okay.
So do you want to basically give everybody an overview of where you are in the cannabis industry at the moment and your path to getting there?
Yeah, I suppose I'm best described as a cannabis educator, both through my articles. I'm a medical cannabis writer. So I write, my articles are mostly for Project CBD, which is one of the kind of most respected cannabis resources, really. That's mostly kind of science articles, usually doctors and scientists. And then there's little old me who barely scrapes through my science GCSEs. But so I write for them about medical cannabis, the endocannabinoid system. I interview a lot of scientists and researchers and also patients as well. I've written a book about CBD because my kind of entry into this world was through the CBD industry. It's one of those kind of things of the stars aligning, really. I knew nothing really about cannabis more than your average person. A friend's mum was dying of cancer. She was given cannabis oil in the last few months of her life, and it just allowed her to die with dignity. And I kind of swore to my friend that I would do something about it. I was a writer at the time. I was living in southern Spain. And next thing I know, there's a hemp fair in Seville where I was living. A week later, I'm offered a job in a CBD company as a full-time content writer for them, basically. So it's sort of started there. I kind of immersed myself in all things cannabis. I could barely pronounce the word cannabinoid at the time, I remember. And yeah, just kind of, lived and breathed everything related to hemp, cannabis, cannabinoids, endocannabinoid system, and also understanding that, how the CBD industry works, how the products are made, all that kind of stuff. But always my main motivation is getting greater access for patients, because for me it's a matter of a human right, really. It's a matter of public health. This is something that could help so many people, and yet we're so far away from it being accessible. And sort of in from that as well, from writing my book, I started a podcast called Cannabis Voices, which is just giving a voice to patients, to researchers, to doctors. It's not really to do with the business side of things, because that business is not something I'm really interested in. And it's really, another motivating factor is defending the plant, really. So I'm a little bit kind of at odds with possibly the way things are going and, sort of the pharmaceutical model, which ultimately will sort of, I hope not take over, but so I'm there fighting for the patient, for also, for the plant, and also for better access.
Well, that's going to lead me on to, I was actually going to go the other topic first and then this one second, but as we're there, the first thing we can talk about is patient access. Let me answer this. Are there any countries in Europe, UK included, that are scoring 10 out of 10 in terms of patient access? And are there any countries that are scoring 0 or 1 out of 10? Or is everybody kind of in or around that 3, 4, 5 out of 10 mark? They're trying.
I think Germany is probably one of the countries that I'm not an expert across all the countries in Europe, but they have a system in place. All the systems have teething problems. So I think in Germany, at least you can get a prescription that is covered by not all health insurance providers, but it is it's not it's something that is accessible, and then the numbers of prescriptions of patients getting prescriptions has increased quite dramatically since legalization came in. The UK, there was the rescheduling of cannabis in 2018, and what essentially was a legalization of medical cannabis started, I think, on November in 2018, and it's kind of 2 years have gone by, and there's a huge amount of frustration from patients because, they just kind of assume that it would be available through the NHS, our National Health Service. The NHS is a kind of finite pot of money, and there are various kind of protocols and steps for the kind of regulators to decide whether a medicine can be prescribed or not. And at the moment, they've kind of said, apart from for two for MS and for epilepsy, rare types of epilepsy, pediatric epilepsy, it cannot be prescribed on the NHS. So what's happened there is there's a two-tier kind of private cannabis clinic kind of sector that's developed. And initially it was really expensive. Kind of you were paying £250 for a consultation, initial consultation. Then you might be paying, parents of children with epilepsy are paying, maybe £2,000, which, you can work that out in euros or dollars a month. Those prices have come down, and so it's a lot more affordable. So, if you can afford it, you can access legally medical cannabis in the UK for many conditions. Okay. To give an example of, for me, which is a kind of upsetting situation in the country. So I lived for 10 years in southern Spain. And so I kind of, when I was entering the world of cannabis, that's kind of where I had most access to patients and scientists, etc. So there's this kind of idea that medical cannabis is legal in Spain. You can, if you go to Barcelona, you can smell cannabis on the street. Anywhere in Spain, you've got the cannabis clubs, etc. You can grow at home. They've also got the most leading scientists in the world who made the amazing breakthroughs for the anti-tumoral properties of cannabinoids for cancer. They've got an amazing climate. They export, rather like the UK, they export huge amounts of medical grade cannabis to other countries, and yet patients have no legal access. And that's something that, I obviously I'm in the UK now, but I will always be kind of also fighting for the patients in Spain, because frankly, it's a situation that's, it's tragic, really, I find. So those are the kind of extremes, I suppose. And then, you've got things kind of somewhere in between in terms of what's working and what isn't working.
Okay, yeah, well, that's it. I think Ireland will be on the lower end of the scale when it comes to patient access.
Yeah. I mean, it all seemed, when I was living in Spain and I was kind of following the Vera Twomey story and everything that was happening in the Dáil and the debate and the vote, and it was so exciting. It seemed, that things were finally moving. And then I think, there was a paper that the government kind of released, which was so restrictive. And, I think barely any patients have actually accessed medical cannabis in Ireland, which again is, extremely, extremely sad. I don't know. Do you think that will change?
Yeah, well, we're hoping now that by the end of this year, there's going to be some sort of movement on it. Like, the list of candidates that can access medical cannabis is so small and minute that it doesn't justify setting up a big industry. So you have the patients who do have access then had to go to Amsterdam to gain access to medicine. So during COVID, there ended up being a big issue. So the Minister for Health recently did reinstate the supply chain for them. But the cost of what they're paying compared to the ability for Irish companies to be able to do research and development themselves and create their own medicines should be the way forward. I think for every individual country, there's a flourishing industry there for young entrepreneurs to be able to step into if the red tape is taken away.
Yeah, absolutely.
The last topic I want to talk to you about is something I know you know a lot about and something most people don't know very much about. It's the endocannabinoid system. Can you explain what the ECS is to the viewers and why it's so important and how it functions with the human body?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I should start with how the endocannabinoid system was discovered. So, as you know, many of your kind of listeners and viewers will know that there are the different cannabinoids, so the compounds in the cannabis plant. So researchers were studying THC, which is the compound that creates the kind of high effect. And so they really wanted to work out how it activates, what receptors it activates it in the body, how it, creates this effect. And what they discovered were this kind of network of receptors in the brain and central nervous system. And then another class of receptor that's quite similar, but in generally found in the kind of peripheral nervous system and the immune system and organs, and also it's actually in the central nervous system and in the brain as well. Which kind of, led to the question, okay, if there's this sort of network of receptors, there must be naturally produced chemicals in the body that kind of fit into these receptors. It's kind of a lock and a key, and then create some some kind of effect in the body. Eventually, they discovered what have been called cannabinoids. So there's one cannabinoid called anandamide, another one called 2-AG, which actually activate and bind with these receptors, which then kind of left the question, okay, this is happening in the body, but what's the point of it? What's what effect is it creating? And what they realized was it's actually creating what's called homeostasis. So it's like creating balance in the body. So it's like a regulating system. It's not just related to kind of neurotransmitters, but one effect is actually kind of mediating the firing of my brain's gone transmitters, sorry, so kind of mediating and modulating their firing in the brain. So for conditions where like epilepsy or possibly autism as well, when there is a kind of excessive amount of neurotransmitter activity, possibly this endocannabinoid system is not working as it should be. So the endocannabinoid system is basically regulating every biological function in the body, appetite, sleep, reproduction, pain, our mood, everything that that's happening in our body is regulated by the endocannabinoid system. So it's like this kind of huge discovery that isn't actually being taught in medical school. So one of the kind of researchers who knows a lot about the endocannabinoid system is someone called Dr. Ethan Russo, and he's developed this idea of something called endocannabinoid deficiency. So he noticed there was a kind of a cluster of conditions that shared a kind of oversensitivity to pain, basically. So things like fibromyalgia, IBS, migraines, and they measured the levels of endocannabinoid system, and they found, or the levels of endocannabinoids, and they found that actually in these conditions there was a deficiency or lower levels of these endocannabinoids. And so the conclusion was that most likely there is some kind of deficiency. What was interesting when I spoke to Ethan Russo, because in the kind of cannabis world, it's like, oh, it's disgusting, the endocannabinoid system isn't taught in medical school. What was interesting, what he said was, he trained to be a doctor, probably 30 or 40, if not more years ago. And at that point, the syllabus was absolutely packed. So to kind of fit in something else, they haven't quite worked out how to do it. I mean, it may also be because it's related to cannabis, and so there's still a stigma about it. So it's not always something that's so personal against the endocannabinoid system and medical cannabis and patients getting better access. But hopefully, I think now things are starting to change. I saw yesterday in something that was on Facebook, there's a company in the UK who are offering a kind of free training to health professionals in the endocannabinoid system. I'm sure there's some kind of business motive behind it, but I think for doctors it's like a massive piece of information that's missing. If you have a patient that comes in with fibromyalgia, IBS, chronic fatigue, often these go together, anxiety, and you're kind of giving pills for the different kind of symptoms, thinking they're completely unrelated, whereas actually behind it all there could be something such as endocannabinoid deficiency that's actually explaining why this is happening. And from that, actually, you can then create a treatment plan that's possibly different to just like medicating all these different separate conditions, which could be, the sort of, we're talking here, phytocannabinoids, so the compounds in the cannabis plant also interact with the endocannabinoid system. But there's also other stuff you can do. So we know that like exercise, running in particular, actually gives you a kind of a boost of anandamide. I like doing ecstatic dance, and I'm sure if they measured my anandamide levels afterwards, I'm sure there would be a difference. Even singing, actually, there was a study that showed that in a choir that these ladies singing actually significantly raise their endocannabinoid levels. Also diet as well, making sure you get plenty of your omega fatty acids as well. So yeah, that's the endocannabinoid system.
That's been absolutely amazing. I think that there's going to be a huge amount of people watching this now who have a clear understanding of exactly what the ECS is. I can't thank you enough for coming on to the show. Mary has a book as well that she released called the CBD book. The website's there below on the screen, marybiles.com. You can go and check it out. A lot of her articles are there. It's a great website. I'd highly recommend everybody checking out the book as well. It's very informative for anybody who's looking to educate themselves on this topic. Mary, is there anything going on in the foreseeable future for you in the industry, or is
yeah, I mean, I'm involved with something, a patient advocacy organisation called CPAS here in the UK, and we have a nurses arm. So there's already training going on for doctors and consultants, but often nurses, when a patient is already using cannabis, possibly from the illicit market, or are interested in accessing cannabis, it's often their nurses who actually is the first person that they disclose that to, particularly with cancer patients, but chronic pain, anxiety, all the different conditions, and so we're providing training for nurses. We just started something which is an MDT series, so it's using the kind of multidisciplinary team format that's commonly used in medicine, to use that format for particular conditions. So we have a teach-in on the medicinal use of cannabis. So the first one we did was on chronic pain, and then in the second session we had an MDT where there was a GP, there was our nurse, there was the pain consultant, who all discussed a particular patient's case. So we're doing exciting work, and we'll be doing more of those MDT series, and they're also open to anybody. Actually, you don't have to be in the medical profession. They're extremely informative.
Amazing, great work being done as always. I think it's going to be an exciting enough year. There was a lot of growth last year in the cannabis industry. I think there's going to be a year of consolidation this year, and hopefully we start getting good products at good value for a wide range of consumers, not just a small few.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the way it's going. All of us, unfortunately, all of us our bones start creaking. Everything starts to fall apart, and chronic pain, and all the various things. And for all these conditions that often come with old age, cannabis can be extremely helpful. So I think that will sort of change the demographic of people who start accessing and break down that stigma as well.
That's it. I think less regulation, more innovation on products that are consumable apart from smokable flower, and I think we'll be on our way there. So thank you very much for taking part in the show. I hope you have a great day, and I hope to talk to you again in the future, and we'll be able to round up any big events that happen in the coming year.
Great.
Thanks very much, Mary. Cheers, everybody.